Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexa McCrae. I'm here at Harvard Medical School, and we're absolutely delighted to be able to host this meeting together, of course, with the Wilhelm Foundation, the UDNI, and the UDNF. And it's a very special day for us. It's going to be a full day, a full morning, I should say. So we'll have quite a few speakers, and we'll keep things moving, but you'll find, I think, that this is going to be a fascinating meeting. So thank you all for coming. And it's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker this morning, whose name is Liam Harazim. Liam.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Liam Harazim. I am 17 years old, and I've been living with the undiagnosed disease for around 8 years now. Before I begin, I just want to give a huge thank you to Helena Mick from the Wilhelm Foundation, as well as the UDN, for having me here today. It's a huge honor, and I really appreciate it. Here are just some few things that kind of represent me and who I am. We've been living in California, and I've been going to Radius Children's Hospital down there. And after a while of stumping the doctors down there, I then went and got a second opinion at Boston, where I have also stumped the doctors. Some things I really like to do. I really love Marvel and Star Wars and sci-fi stuff like that. And I also, things to do for fun, I really love to play Xbox and PlayStation with my brother. I always love to do Legos as well. And I have the zebra up there because I always be sure to represent my stripes on Rare Disease Day. As a kid, I was very athletic. I loved to go fishing with my siblings and my granddad. And then shortly later, I discovered my passion for baseball. I absolutely loved baseball, and I told my mom and dad that I was going to be a pitcher. And then when I turned 10, around 2017, my whole life changed. And I started tripping and falling a lot. I started falling behind in group walks in school, and we didn't really know what was going on. And we went to the doctors, and they came up with the consensus of perhaps this is CMT, or perhaps there's something muscular going on. And we then got serial casting, and I got braces, which for a while was really good because I was able to move a little bit with them. And shortly later, we were researching CMT, and we found out that in Iowa, there was the world professional, Dr. Michael Shai, and we went out there. Not only did he say, Liam, I do not think you have CMT, but he also said, when you go back to California, I really want them to check out your abdomen and your liver, because I feel like there's something here that we're missing. And I went back to California and I told the doctors what they said. Fast forward a little bit, I had a muscle and nerve biopsy, came back inconclusive. I had a liver biopsy and it came back with stage 4 cirrhosis of the liver. And at the time, I was, like I said, around 10 or 11 years old. And we were just absolutely shocked. After a while of going through all the other testing out there, it seemed like we were coming up with dead ends. And we then took the chance and came out to Boston, where I met some very important people, such as Dr. Bodemer, who gave me the privilege and honor of speaking at the Rosalind Franklin event back in September to give my disease and my story a bit more exposure. My disease came on very hard and very fast. It came on very abruptly, and quite frankly, we were running around like headless chickens. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know why nothing was coming back. And we were all, quite frankly, very confused and very scared. It not only did it start in my feet, but it worked its way up through my body and it really developed into my hands as well. And doing things like opening a bottle or trying to hold on to a handrail, I just have overwhelming amounts of weakness. And it was very, very just sad to see the things that you were once able to do slowly drift away and practically become forgotten memories or a past life. Some of my next big symptoms are, it then came on with inflammation, and it seemed like every day it was a roll of the dice whether I'd get a bloody nose, a runny nose, or a congested nose. Then it worked its way into my eyes, where I would get these massive styes, where some days I would wake up and I couldn't see a thing. Then it turned to lymphedema, and this was around 2020, where my legs just completely blew up and I couldn't even wear my braces anymore, which was the one thing at the time which was giving me that independence, causing a spiral of weakness, loss of mobility, you name it. And as you can imagine, this then turned into more tests, blood tests, genome, exome, mRNA sequencing. I had it, and these doctors just could not come up with something to really tell us. As you can imagine, school was a nightmare, and it was practically impossible to do anything, have any sort of determination and will to continue to do what I was doing. And I'll say probably the thing that's happened most recently and that shocked me the most was back in 2022, where I had a sty, or at least I thought it was, and I thought I had residual covering my right eye. But despite the numerous times of me wiping it away, it wasn't coming off. So when we went to the hospital and got the testing, it confirmed optic neuritis, but that wasn't all, because on that same MRI testing, we found a small mass on my neck. And to fast forward a month later, it was in fact a very big mass, and it was actually a 3.8 centimeter cancerous cyst on my thyroid, causing me to have a full thyroidectomy, removing my whole thyroid. And just to recap, I lost half my vision and my thyroid within 3 months. I think the most challenging thing of my journey of rare diseases is the fact that I'm not alone in this, and there are millions of people around the world who also suffer from rare diseases. And I know foundations like Wilhelm and Nord and Yudi and I, we're all working to try to find answers and try to help some people to figure out what's going on. And we just need to take this to the step further. And the time is now. We need to somehow come up with a global network and a global system that everyone around the world can be added to and really focus on collaboration to get people the answers and help that they need. And this is something I really hope that we can accomplish in the near future. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Liam. I have heard Liam once before here in Boston, and I told my husband that if we will have a meeting here in Boston, we will ask Liam to be the keynote speaker, since he put what everything is about for all of us who are working with undiagnosed diseases and to solve the undiagnosed diseases. So I would like to welcome you all in the audience. We are very happy to be here with you, and we would like to also to thank you all the speakers, and wish you all around the globe welcome to the Undiagnosed Day. My name is Helen Cederoth, and I'm from Sweden, and together with my husband Mick, we started Wilhelm Foundation when our 3 children passed away in an undiagnosed disease in 3 years. Wilhelm, 16 years old. Emma, 6 years old. She died the year after Wilhelm. And 2 years after Emma, Hugo died, 10 years old. And now we are working to do what Liam asked about, to start collaboration all over the globe. Since we can't do this by ourselves, we have to work together. And thanks to Judy and I, we are doing so, but we have to be more. We have to work even better, since we don't know today that we can solve only 40%. And we have to focus on the 60% of the undiagnosed that can't be solved with the latest diagnostic methods. So I would like to wish you all welcome to the Undiagnosed Day and to listen to all the wonderful speakers we have today. Welcome.
Thank you, Helene. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, or I guess good evening, depending on where you're joining us from around the globe. My name is Amy Gray, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation. It's really a privilege and an honor to be partnering with Helene and the Wilhelm Foundation and UD and I on this event. I first met Helene when she was on the board of directors for our foundation, helping launch our foundation just over a year ago. Our mission at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation is to help improve access to diagnosis, research, and care for all with undiagnosed and ultra-rare conditions. And we focus on those efforts here in the United States, but partnering with the amazing organizations across the globe, because as Helene said, and as Liam said, it's going to take all of us collaborating together to continue to make more progress for those in our community. So we're thrilled that you are joining us here today. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and a really wonderful panel planned at the end of the day. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you. So thank you very much. So you'll see that, you'll see the agenda up here. For those of you who are speakers, look to see who's right before you, because we're going to be moving through the talks rather quickly. So I won't introduce everyone at this moment, but you can see we have quite an interesting lineup of speakers, starting with Rick, I should have asked you to pronounce it, Guidotti, who is a photographer who has been working with the UDNI for quite a while. So I'll turn this over to him now. Thank you.
I thought I'd give a little background on how I approach and how my journey to the undiagnosed, and also to collaborate with the Wilhelm Foundation. I started out my career, I'm a fashion photographer based in New York City. I also lived in Milan and Paris for several years. Got to work with all great magazines like Elle Magazine, Marie Claire, and Harper's. And this is Claudia Schiffer. This is Claudia Schiffer from a Harper's Bazaar shoot. Elle Magazine, Marie Claire. A lot of work with Yves Saint Laurent in Paris. I do a lot of work with the House of Saint Laurent in Paris. That's a portrait of Mr. Saint Laurent that's in every boutique worldwide, and an image from one of our global campaigns. French Elle Magazine, and here's New York Style Magazine, and of course another French Elle Magazine. And this is the incredible Cindy Crawford from a Revlon shoot. Amazing work in this great community, traveling around the globe, living in Milan, Paris, New York, working with these great clients and these great models. But it was really frustrating because I was always told who was beautiful. I was always told who the face of the season was, and we'd run and photograph that face. And what was so frustrating about it, as an artist, I continue never to see beauty just on covers of magazines. I see beauty absolutely everywhere. I was leaving my studio one afternoon after doing a casting for Elle Magazine, and I spotted this kid waiting for a bus with white hair, pale skin. She had this genetic condition, albinism. Albino was the common term. Stunning, yet never included in the beauty standard. I never met a model that looked like this. I wanted to photograph her immediately. It's like, you're amazing. But the bus came and she took off, and I had to find photographs of her. So I went to medical textbooks. Now, I never saw a medical textbook prior to that moment. I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York City, so I studied art and photography, but I thought I'd find images of this gorgeous kid in those books. But instead of images of that kid, these are the images that I saw. The albino eye was the caption on the top left photograph. Then lots of images in cancer clinics worldwide, and then tons of photographs of kids, not just with albinism, but with many genetic conditions, always presented with the black bar across their eyes. I very happily shut that medical textbook, put it back on the shelf, hoping never to have to see another medical textbook for the rest of my life. I went to the encyclopedias, but there I found The Family in the Circus. And the more digging I did, the more negative representations, from Hollywood, Princess Bride, to Powder, to the Matrix Reloaded, to the evil character in the Da Vinci Code. Terrible information was out there. But I saw that there was an advocacy organization called NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation. I called them immediately and said, hey, I'm a fashion photographer. Let's show the world the beauty of albinism. This is going to be amazing. And they said, get lost. I'm a New Yorker. I don't give up quite so easily. And they made it very clear to me early days of their fear of exploitation, that every time there was a magazine article about a kid with albinism, it was always the story about a victim. It was always negative. It was always just exploitative, just horrible, terrible negative representation. I said, well, I have to agree with you. I've been searching and searching, and I can't find one positive representation of albinism anywhere. So let's do something strange here. Let's form a non-traditional partnership. Fashion photographer, genetic support group, and together we'll collaborate and create a photographic essay that finally celebrates the beauty of albinism. And they agreed. In walks the first model. Positive Exposure was born the day in walks the first model. She's gorgeous, long white hair, pale skin. She's about 5'9". She's extraordinary. But she walks into my studio with her shoulders hunched, head down, no eye contact, one-word answers. This kid had zero self-esteem as a direct result of the teasing, the bullying, and the abuse she experienced every single day in the classroom environment. because of her difference. And it broke my heart to see this gorgeous kid with zero self-esteem. I'm thinking, how am I going to photograph her? But just the day before, I had photographed Cindy Crawford on another Revlon shoot on the same set in my studio. And I thought, out of respect for this gorgeous kid, I'm going to photograph her like I would any supermodel. So the fan went on, the music went on, and I literally held up a mirror and said, Christine, look at yourself. You're magnificent. And this kid looked in the mirror and she saw exactly what I saw. And she went from this to this, exploding literally with a smile that lit up New York City. Thank you. This gorgeous kid desperately needed to change the way she saw herself. Her community desperately needed to change the way that they saw her difference. So she created a philosophy that drives positive exposure till this day, 25 years later. And that philosophy has changed how you see how you change. Those first images were a cover story in Life magazine called Redefining Beauty. Got a lot of accolades for it, but one of the awards I received was from the Genetic Alliance, which was a coalition of all the genetic support groups they're based in DC, and they presented me with the Art of Reporting Award. Great honor, and as I received the award, the president and director at the time said, we're looking at all these beautiful images of albinism. There's a universal message here. Would you ever consider photographing some of our other genetic support groups that we work with, that we collaborate with, to celebrate their difference? I'm like, wonderful, I'd love to. She said, well, we have a conference coming up for the Chromosome 18 Registry and Research Society. I'm like, okay, what's that? She said, well, you know, when you have an anomaly on your 18th chromosome. And remember, I'm a fashion photographer, never heard the words anomaly and chromosome in the same sentence prior to that moment. But I went back to those medical textbooks to find out what a chromosome 18 anomaly looks like. And those were the images that I saw. I saw lots of images of stillborns, a lot of images of kids with cleft palates and trachs and feeding tubes and mobility issues. I'm thinking, albinism was so easy. This is terrifying. But I went to that conference. It was in San Antonio, and I walked into that room, and I had these images burned in my head. And there was a clown on stage making balloon animals. And as I walked in, I was instantly surrounded by kids screaming with laughter. There were kids with cleft palates and trachs and feeding tubes and mobility issues, but there were kids and they were having a blast. These are some of the kids that I met: Pauline, Sean, Ellington, probably the coolest kid I know, Remy. And not only just kids, this is Rebecca from Chicago. There were kids, there were adults, there were people. Where was that one smile, that one giggle when I was trying to research what a chromosome 18 anomaly looked like? We created 1 billion images that week, and I came back to my studio in New York City, and I was approached by Francis Collins, who was then the director of the National Human Genome Research Institute at the time. And they just mapped the people's genome, and he invited me to create a photographic exhibition that would launch at the People's Genome Celebration at the Museum of Natural History in DC, and then travel to all the Smithsonian sites worldwide celebrating the people's genome. And his idea, his vision was to show albinism and diversity within that diagnosis. Well, I told him all about, you know, the extraordinary experience I just had at the Chromosome 18 conference, and that there really was a universal message. Could we invite all the genetic support groups and advocacy groups to participate? And of course, he agreed. First group that stepped up was the National Marfan Foundation. Of course, you all know Marfan syndrome, a connective tissue disorder. You go very, very tall, at risk of an aortic dissection, scoliosis. These were the images that I saw in those medical textbooks. But I knew as an artist, I knew as healthcare providers in training and practitioners, you needed to see exactly how and identify how a connective tissue disorder presents itself. But I knew as an artist, I can give you that information, but add a key ingredient that's missing. And of course, that key ingredient is Billy. That key ingredient is humanity. So we've been, for the last 25 years, we've been collaborating with advocacy groups around the globe. One of the things I saw so important in all these advocacy groups and meetings is how important the family situation is, how important families are for one another, how they support each other. There's a network of families and friends and specialists. When I heard about the Undiagnosed initiative, and I met Helene and Nick, and they told me their story and how the families, when you don't have a diagnosis, you are so alone. And they asked me to join forces and travel with them around the globe to present opportunities to celebrate, build community, and make sure no one ever felt as alone as they did when they had their original never got their diagnosis, and how alone they felt when they were losing their children. And together we traveled all over the globe. We were actually just recently in South Korea, which is amazing. And Soup is here, and he's just the coolest collaborator ever. But we've also traveled to West Africa and to India and Australia and the Netherlands and Sweden. And we're traveling now to Latin America. So we're really excited about the next steps. Thank you so much. And I think my time is up. Thank you. Hey!
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rick. So our next speaker is going to be Representative Marjorie Decker from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So let's welcome her.
Good morning. Rick, what a beautiful way to just start. That just has filled my heart with such warmth. So thank you. My name is Marjorie Decker, and while I am the state representative from Cambridge, I'm the chair of the Joint Committee on Public Health. And thank you for having me here today. My journey into understanding rare disease has been one that started 12 years ago when I was first elected to the House of Representatives. I was doing a tour, as I often do, with organizations and people in my district to try to better understand who am I representing, what are the needs. And I had this incredible tour at then Bluebird. They were talking about this thing that I'd never heard of, this gene therapy. And they were describing adrenoleukodystrophy, which I took a while to figure out how to say it. And I learned how to say it correctly because over time, I also then met with a lot of families and parents from Massachusetts and from around the country. And I became so invested in their journey to know that it took a decade for finally the FDA to approve this incredible gene therapy. I was also a mom of 2 children. My son was just 4 years old when I got elected. And to know that we have additional tools that we could be using to identify rare diseases at a time that gives families and providers more time. And so that was my first adventure into this. And I said, well, why aren't we doing this in newborn screening? I thought, so easy, I'll just tell them to do it and they'll do it. You know, that is kind of the upside to having new people elected, the optimism and the hope that this is really easy and otherwise it should have just been done. And it really did help me understand sort of the complexity around newborn screening. And even as a state agency, then the Department of Public Health, what it takes. I was able to, with persistence and relentlessness, get them to then bring it in as a pilot, which I believe it still is a pilot, but it's been going on. And over time, learned more and more about as medicine continues to evolve, as science continues to evolve, and it's incredible. We are at a time in which we have gene therapy is evolving, and both the time of what it takes to maybe help cure people or to help people have less suffering and to help people heal, it's also changing how we have to approach medicine and the cost of how we cover medicine. So my staff, as usual, prepares us like 1,000 notes for me. And I usually skip all of them and go to the things that I think, thank you guys are great. But just to say that part of this journey has been understanding how do we ensure, as chair of public health, my job and in public health in general is to make sure that we are taking care of the collective well-being. And that in that vision of the whole, how do we really apply the lens of equity to that? To make sure that it's not just the masses, and to make sure that understanding that equity is not just about equal parts. It's about investing in where people are when they need it and where they need it. And when I think about rare disease, that's exactly the trajectory that we are on. When we think about public health policy, the cost of medicine, the innovation in medicine, the rapid innovation, and how do we make sure that collectively that people are able to have their needs met and that we also don't bankrupt the entire healthcare system, right? So it's this balance that many of you are all too familiar with. And I can tell you, we have in the legislature, and we are right now with the leadership of Speaker Mariano, who has been in many ways the architect of modernizing healthcare policy in Massachusetts, which was the foundation of what is now often referred to as Obamacare. But it started in Massachusetts with then Governor Romney, and we called it Romney Care because he signed it. But we are in the process of modernizing. What does it look like today when gene therapy didn't exist over a decade and a half ago when we first did this? So understanding how do we limit out-of-pocket cost for individuals? How do we ensure that people have access? And we did pass a telehealth bill in the middle of the pandemic that we have maintained. So meaning many people can continue to see providers regardless of where they're at. And we know that for a lot of people, particularly for people who are struggling with a rare disease, making sure they have access and don't have to actually time and money that it takes to travel to go find experts. Last session, I carried a bill. Again, this is how this worked. I had a constituent call and she said it was about her friend who was not a constituent, and say, I have this friend and she's a single mom of 3 children. And she is struggling with an illness right now, and her doctor knows what medicine she needs. But there is this policy that most insurance companies have adopted across the country. We call it as fail first. We're going to make you take several other drugs and fail at that drug. We know it's going to fail. We know it's probably going to have really bad side effects as well that are unnecessary. And you may lose time in your life as well as income. And so based on that conversation, and again, I will say the good news about being a newly elected official is you come in fighting. 12 years later, I actually still have that fight. It has never dimmed, and it only grows stronger every time I talk to an individual whose story feels really unjust and unnecessary. And so I dug into the step therapy bill. And Massachusetts is now one of the states that your doctor and you get to talk about what is the best medicine, and you go directly to that medicine. So you no longer have to do a fail first policy. We are looking at PBM reform right now in Massachusetts. We are looking at, again, what is the cap on drug cost? How do we manage the upfront cost of gene therapy, knowing for many of our life science companies, and I come from a city where life sciences were really proud of the incredible innovative work that's happening in Cambridge. But we also know that we have to balance and become a lot more creative and in partnerships with life sciences to say, okay, we understand that the upfront costs can be really, really big. And there's a lot of, most companies won't make it. They will lose millions, right? That's the gamble. But in fact, we need to be cheering on their wins and hope that they do make it, because whenever they do make it, we know that lives will be saved and we know that suffering will be reduced. So we are taking a look at some of the innovative ways to look at how we, in fact, allow access. Because if we're really, really looking at the public health and the well-being of us collectively, then we will always be making sure that innovation is not innovation and treatment is not a privilege. And right now it often is for a lot of people. So there's a lot of other really interesting facts that my staff included in this. But I will tell you that I'm always happy to be a resource, but more importantly, I think it's important for you to know advocacy really matters. For me, what really brought me into this field of public health was that first visit as a state rep, visiting the labs of Bluebird, and then more importantly, meeting families, meeting parents, meeting children, meeting parents who've lost their children, and meeting parents whose children were still, where hope was still there. And that is what typically will bind almost every elected official to becoming invested in the advocacy and the policies that matter the most to you, and they certainly have for me. So thank you for all the advocacy work that you do. For those of you who really choose to share your story, whether it's your story or the story of a loved one, I also always want to acknowledge that comes at a cost, because not often you're struggling with the disease that you are trying to quickly figure out how do we reduce the suffering. But you're also then, it takes a toll to tell your story and to share your story, especially when sharing your story doesn't always immediately turn into a changed outcome, right? So I would say stay optimistic, stay relentless. Those are the two qualities that I bring to this job every day. That doesn't mean, and my staff can confirm, that I'm not often really frustrated and even like what some might describe as angry sometimes. But those are the things that fuel me to keep going. And I know it's what fuels many of you to be here today. So thank you for your courage, your bravery, and your activism.
Excellent. Wonderful to have her in our corner here in Massachusetts. Okay, so the next speaker is going to be Michelle Herndon, who is going to tell us about a very exciting program, the Patient Navigator program that has been launched by the UDNF. Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much to UDNI, Helene, Mick, Amy with the UDNF for having me here today, and welcome to our online viewers as well. I'm Michelle. I'm the director of the Patient Navigation Program at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation. I'm also the parent of a son, Mitchell, who was diagnosed through the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. He stumped doctors for about 5 years at many different hospitals, just like Liam, and ultimately was seen at the Baylor site of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, where they then, amazingly put his genome into fruit flies, which was something I had never, ever heard of before, and ultimately found the genetic variant that was causing his disease. And then we're able to find one other patient in South Korea to kind of give us that confirmatory sign that they had cracked the case. So after stumping doctors for 5 years, the UDN was actually the detectives who solved my son's case. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him and what's been happening at the end of this. But first of all, the patient navigation program at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. It was really born out of, Helene and Mick felt alone during their journey with their kids, and so many undiagnosed feel alone. They don't feel like they have a community. And we've heard this from UDN peer, UDNF peer. We've heard this from families, advocates, and we knew that there needed to be something to help them not feel alone. And I felt this personally, even though I had an amazing community of friends, neighbors, family, church. I worked at an amazing hospital in St. Louis and had tons of, really smart doctors, nurses supporting us and caring for my son, but I still felt alone. So that is where this program came from. And you may have heard of patient navigation. It was born in the world of oncology and cancer to really guide patients to early diagnosis, prevention. It was very successful, and patient navigation has moved into so many other disciplines. And why don't we have patient navigators for the undiagnosed? We really felt like that was something that could help the diagnostic odyssey. So you can see there, navigation assists patients and families by facilitating access to and coordination among services, as well as with providing educational and emotional support. And that really is our aim. We launched our program on March 1st with the UDNF. And as you can see here, about 2/3 of our patients so far, our clients, have reached out to us. They are in the UDN currently, and they're just needing some support along the way. They have their local site staff, their coordinator and the PI, they have them. However, they have a whole other, plate of patients, and, sometimes because of bandwidth are unable to provide all of the support along the way that the patient may need. And so we, as the navigators, want to step in and support the sites and support the patients as well. So you can see we have UDN patients. We also have non-UDN patients. So that those may be patients who for some reason were not accepted by the UDN. And so we are assisting them in trying to find other programs for the undiagnosed, or what are the next steps for them. And then we also have a small group of what I'm calling post-diagnosis. So these would be patients who have recently been given the diagnosis of an ultra rare disease, and they call us and say, now what? So I work a lot with those families, and that comes out of a personal kind of passion of mine, because when my son received his diagnosis from the UDN, I was there. I was like, okay, great. Now what? And so we really want to help support, patients and families who say, what about research? What about starting a foundation? What about finding other patients around the world? We want to begin to support them and connect them to resources that will help them. You can see here that as of right now, the majority of our clients are adults. And then the others would be guardians of children and guardians of adults. And then one of the things that you saw that patient navigation is intended to do is connect to other resources and provide education. And so one of the things we've done with the UDNF is we've partnered with an organization called Unite Us. This is a nationwide network within the United States of social support organizations that agree to accept referrals from one another. And so these, you can see here, about 40% of our patients, that the number one need that they had at the moment was mental or behavioral health referral. And so through our Unite Us network, we're able to find them a counselor, a therapist, an organization in their area that is accepting new patients. That's one of the things that we really wanted the navigators to be able to do. We know there are a lot of programs out there, a lot of grants, a lot of scholarships, a lot of just different clinics, but you have to do the research to find out if you actually qualify. And I remember so many nights, Googling at 2 a.m. while my son Mitchell was in the hospital, oh, would he qualify for that? No, nobody qualify for that. And we really wanted the navigators to be able to do that work for the patients and then present them with resources already curated that we knew that they met the requirements for. So you can see here our top two referrals that we've sent out so far, as I said, mental and behavioral health, and then income support. For all of you out there, if you're hearing this and thinking, oh, I would love to reach out to a navigator, or I know someone who might benefit from this, you can go to our website, udnf.org, and there's a section called For Patients. So you'll click on that in the Patient Navigator program, and then there is a short form that you fill out that basically says your name, some information, are you in the UDN or not? What are you seeking from the navigator? And one of us will get back to you, usually within 2 to 3 business days. This is our team. I'm super excited about the team that we were able to pull together. 2 of our navigators are here with us. So if you see Kristen in the blue and Mary in the blue, they are both here. This is a really kind of multidisciplinary team. Kristen and I both have a background as pediatric nurses. Jennifer has a 10-year history of advocacy with the Autoinflammatory Alliance. Mary, as many of you know, you've interacted with Mary. She has been involved in the rare world for years and is also a patient herself, which brings a lot of perspective. Dana is our Spanish-speaking navigator. So she specifically works with our patients who do not speak English as their first language and speak Spanish. And then Renisha has a history of social work, background of social work and patient navigation as well. So we really just have a great team, just trying to bring together lived experience, professional experience. Building a community is really important because, again, I didn't feel like I had a community during my journey with Mitchell. I tried really hard to fit into like any group I could find. Like, he had hearing loss, so I signed him up for the St. Louis Teen Hearing Loss Club, and he got a form of chemotherapy. So I was like, hey, he doesn't have cancer, but he has like a Broviac, and cancer people have Broviacs. Can he come to your meeting? I mean, I was really, as a mom, like trying to find any connection. And so we've started this Undiagnosed and Ultra Rare Facebook group, and we would love for anyone out there who is living in the journey of undiagnosed or ultra rare to please join us, join the community. You can get there by scanning that QR code, but you can also search for us on Facebook. So I did want to give you a short update about my son and our journey. This is my son, Mitchell, stumping doctors for 5 years. In 2018 was when the diagnosis was first made by the UDN. Mitchell did pass away in 2019 before the first publication came out about 3 patients that the UDN had found. This is just our timeline I wanted to share with you for those of you out there who are undiagnosed, or for those who maybe have recently gotten a diagnosis. It's slow going. I think even though I was a nurse, I worked at a research hospital, I didn't really realize how slow a lot of these things can be, but we are seeing progress, and it's just really bringing a lot of hope to a lot of people. So 2021, my husband and I did what a lot of people do. We formed a foundation to start raising money and also to start supporting families. In the last 4 years, we've found additional cases from all over the globe. I've learned how to use WhatsApp. I do some translating. I have like Microsoft Translator right next to WhatsApp, and I've translated to Farsi and to Russian. So I'm definitely getting good at that. We had our first patient gathering. I'll show you a picture here in a minute in Houston. We have a lab at Washington University in St. Louis that is working on possible antisense oligonucleotide treatment for Mitchell syndrome. And then this year, we just started recruitment for a retrospective natural history study. And here are a few pictures just to kind of leave you with a smile on your face. One of my favorites is in the right on the bottom. That's Michael. He's a patient. He's graduating from high school here in a few weeks. And that is him holding his vial of Mitchell syndrome fruit flies that have the same genetic mutation that he has. And he was so excited to go to the lab and see the flies. And this is us at our first family group meeting at Houston Methodist in Houston. So there's progress, it's coming, there is hope. So thank you so much for having me.
I think you'll all agree it's great to have Michelle at the helm of this exciting program. So our next speaker is known to everyone, I believe, Dr. Bill Gall, and he's listed as being, the head of the Undiagnosed Diseases Program at NIH, but of course he's much more. He is the principal investigator of the UDN, the nationwide network, as well as founder together with Helene and colleagues of the UDNI. So Bill, thank you.
Thanks very much, Alexa, Helene, Mick, Amy, Mary, Kim, Paul, and all of you who've organized this wonderful session. These have been really inspirational talks. And what I would like to do is to tell you some of the stories of the patients that we've seen, but that's not what I was assigned for. Instead, I'm going to tell you about how the Undiagnosed Disease Network International came about. And so this is a little bit dry compared to my usual talks. But in 2008, we had people who were interested in enhancing the NIH's pursuit of undiagnosed diseases. And so we started this program. It was announced in May of 2008, and with two goals. One, to help people reach a diagnosis, but also to discover new things about biochemistry and cell biology. Because after all, the NIH is a research institute, and they're going to pursue that. So over the years, the Undiagnosed Disease Program, UDP, which we call the intramural program that started on all of this, saw over 6,000 medical records and accepted and evaluated about 1,600 individuals, a lot of kids, a lot of neurology, and made about 400 diagnoses, et cetera, and published a lot. And that the publications and the public relations, the publicity was what really kept us going at the NIH. We do phenotyping, which means we investigate the patients in however fashion we think is suitable, and it's free, so we don't have to get insurance permission, and that allows us to do things in a 5-day stay as inpatients at the clinical center of the NIH. That would often take a year or two as outpatients when you have to get insurance for every step of the way. And we do a bunch of different genetic studies, including research genetic studies, and then some functional studies as well. And over the years, we've made these new discoveries of new diseases. And you can see the gene on the right and the phenotype or the presentation on the left. This is from the intramural program at the NIH. And it's actually a few more now, but so this is slightly outdated. But these are really new things that were not previously known to be diseases. Then around 2013, there was no more funding for the intramural program, and the institute directors got together, and I had to make all sorts of presentations to these sort of big shots. Is this being recorded, by the way? And stream worldwide, yes. Okay. So there's another liability. In the event, we had to get sort of permission, and interestingly enough, when it came down to the last sort of talk that I had to give, the person who suggested that we use the Common Fund to support a national program, which is called the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, that was Tony. Tony Fauci suggested that. He had a lot of influence. So we were funded then by the Common Fund, which is $650 million. We didn't get all $650 million, the point is, but it supports things like this, which are initiatives. And in 2014, there were 7 clinical sites as part of this, a coordinating center, a couple of sequencing cores, a model organisms core that Shinya is part of, and a central repository with formal data sharing, because sharing is so important to help make diagnoses and find second cases, essentially. This expanded to 11 sites, 11 clinical sites. We still had the cores in 2018, but it was a 10-year program. So that funding actually stopped in October of 2022. And the Undiagnosed Disease Network, our national organization, is now funded largely through the efforts of NINDS, which is the Neurology Institute. But over the years, the UDN saw 200, almost 2,800 individuals and diagnosed 745 of them, had a bunch of publications, and discovered 70 new diseases. Then there was global expansion. And this started when Helene and Mick came to my laboratory. And this is a picture of us in 2013. Yeah, you can see my t-shirt there. Anyway, it was fairly informal, but they said, what can we do to make this international? And then, the rest is sort of history. We established the Undiagnosed Disease Network International with some relatively small funding from the Undiagnosed Disease Program, because I had purview over that, and also from the Wilhelm Foundation, which they had established. So we had now the UDNI. First thing you get is a logo, apparently. So we had a logo, but we had a charter and committees and policies, et cetera, and had meetings. We had 12 meetings so far. The last one was in Tbilisi. The next one is in Seoul, South Korea. And the first one was in Rome in 2014. And here we are. In 2021, there was one at the Mayo Clinic that Steve Ecker was part of. And we celebrated Helene and Mick's award, which was the Swedish Care Heroes Award at that time. And there was also a hackathon to discover the genetic cause of new diseases, and that occurred in June of 2023. And the Wilhelm Foundation is now, along with the UDNI, sponsoring a second hackathon to make new discoveries, and that will be in Nijmegen in June of this year. These are now the undiagnosed disease programs around the world that were established with the model of the UDP and the UDN, and awfully gratifying. And there are new UDNI initiatives that involve greater dissemination of information through the website, which is out of Rome. Domenica Teruscio and Marco Salvatore run that. We also have a diagnostics working group that's very active in looking at cases and offering advice for those cases to achieve a diagnosis. And a low and middle income countries working group, which has representatives around the world, and which is established a champions program along with the Wilhelm Foundation. And that has the intent to connect local physicians in low and middle income countries with people around the world so that they can collaborate together. And the champions are currently located in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Ghana, Pakistan, and Mali. And the Wilhelm Foundation has just added India to that group to help work together and make diagnoses. These are a couple of the kids who have undiagnosed diseases and are part of the Champions Initiative and the Wilhelm Foundation pursuing their diagnoses. It tells you a little bit about what's going on here. I think I don't have to elucidate upon that. I guess finally, our goal, the goal of all of us here and why we're connected is because we want to lend a hand to those individuals who not only don't have a treatment, they don't have a diagnosis, and don't have a community until we provide them one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gall. So we're now going to hear from Dr. Marika Mertens, who will be telling us more about the Champions Initiative that you just heard about.
So thank you for having me here on this important day. Let me start with an example. Imagine a child falls ill in a village in a low or middle income country. Her symptoms are baffling, confounding local physicians who lack the resources and specialized knowledge to make a diagnosis. This isn't rare. This is reality for millions around the world. Today, I want to shed light on this often overlooked aspect of global healthcare and to introduce you to a beacon of hope, the Champions Initiative. At this map, you can see low and middle income, low and middle income countries colored in light green and blue. With a population of about 3 billion living in low and middle income countries, it's estimated that millions are affected by a rare disease and undiagnosed condition. The exact number is challenging to determine due to limited healthcare infrastructure and diagnostic capabilities. But it's clear that millions of people suffer from undiagnosed or rare diseases in those areas. This is highlighting the urgent need for improved access to healthcare and diagnostic services. Therefore, Helen and Mick, alongside Dr. Bilgal, founded the initiative with a vision to empower healthcare professionals from those regions, particularly to diagnose more patients with undiagnosed diseases. The Champions Initiative supports senior physicians from low and middle income countries. They are called the champions. And here you can see our champions. We hope that there will be more in the future. These champions are often working in challenging environments with limited resources. Through the Champions Initiative, they are connected with leading medical institutions such as the Boston Children's. Through their work and collaboration, they play a critical role in advancing global health equity. And it is with great pride that I can present you today the Rare Disease Championships program at the Boston Children's together with Nord. This program is dedicated to physicians from low and middle income countries to get deep insights into the fields of rare disorders. Through this program, we not only empower physicians to enhance their skills and knowledge, but also foster a culture of partnership and solidarity across borders. Our internship program offers a 6-week intensive training course for physicians from low and middle income countries, focusing on rare diseases. The program emphasis is tailored to interests and previous knowledge of our interns. Each participant is matched with a senior mentor and maintains a logbook of up to 200 cases in rare diseases, which are encountered during the course. Covering clinical presentation management, research, and diagnostic tools, the program runs 6 times a year. Physicians can apply by submitting a cover letter stating their previous interests, and a letter of support from their institutions. We encourage female physicians to apply, and of course, those with a minority background. And those were our interns in the year 2023. They came from all over the world, from Congo, from Sri Lanka, and from Poland. As we look into the future of the Champions Initiative, 3 questions arrive. Are there opportunities to include more institutions from high and from low and middle income countries? Could we perhaps develop online courses to spread the knowledge? And how can we secure additional fundings? With that, I want to thank Professor Olaf Bodamer, Dr. Lynn Khalif, and Alba Savignon for their dedicated work on the program. Thank you.
It's a terrific program, so we look forward to it growing and going forward. So our next speaker is Professor Moon from the Undiagnosed Disease Program in Korea, in Seoul, Korea, and you heard that that's where the next meeting is going to be. So, Dr. Moon.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm Jang-Seon Moon, and I'm truly honored to be here today and among the such a distinguished group of speakers today. So I am an adult neurologist and also an associate professor at Seoul National University Hospital. And now I'm currently a visiting scientist at Boston Children's Hospital during my sabbatical year. So I'm privileged to be part of Professor Timothy Yu's lab, who is renowned for his groundbreaking research in developing the patient-customized oligonucleotide therapy in rare disease patients, which marks a huge milestone in rare disease research. But today, I'll be discussing Seoul, Korea hosting the next UDNI meeting this September. And also I'll briefly overview some ongoing efforts to enhance rare disease diagnosis in Korea. So as you might have heard from Dr. Gall's presentation, the UDNI brings together all the participants from people from around the world. So my colleagues at Seoul National University Hospital and I have been actively participating in UDNI meetings during the past several years. And we were eagerly anticipating the opportunity to host a meeting one day. And now I'm thrilled to announce that Seoul, Korea will be hosting the next UDNI meeting this September. So as you can see from this map, the previous hosting sites were predominantly located in Europe and United States. So I think that this meeting will offer a great opportunity to increase the awareness of undiagnosed rare disease in Asian countries. So the 13th UDNI meeting will be held in Seoul, Korea during September 5th to 7th, 2024. With Professor Jong-hee Che will be the local host. And what makes this event even more special is that this will be the 10th anniversary of the UDNI conference. So we are planning for some kind of celebrating parties to commemorate this milestone. So I want you to mark these important dates on your calendars. So the conference website will be opened early this June, and the deadline for abstract submission and registration will be set for the end of July. So there are several reasons to consider visiting Seoul. Yeah, so actually it's closer than you might imagine, having numerous direct flights from various destinations. And Seoul is a very exciting city to visit. So they have many enjoyable things from delicious Korean barbecues to some vibrant city culture and the traditional palaces, and also for the famous K-pop and K-culture. Yeah, so please consider attending the 10th year anniversary of the UDNI conference. So I hope to see many of you in Seoul. And for the second part of my talk, I will just briefly cover the rare disease research performed in Korea. So the Korean UDP, KUDP, has started in 2017. So the Professor Jong-hee Che started a pilot study, and owing to the success of that study, the Korean government decided to expand to further projects. So the main KUDP was launched in 2018, and later a nationwide rare disease network was established. And in year 2020, a separate program for adult patients was launched, and we built a functional research core and our own data sharing system for enhancing the UDP research in Korea. So the Korean UDP has been quite successful, fostering international collaborations and contributing to novel gene discoveries. And we have published up to 30 scientific articles so far based on the KUDP data and showcasing the importance of this kind of project in rare disease research. And personally, as mentioned earlier, I have been deeply involved in the adult KUDP, and we were able to report several rare diseases that weren't reported before. And now we are submitting a paper that summarizes the overall findings of adult UDP, KUDP. And in total, about a third of patients received a diagnosis, and the diagnostic rate was higher in some cases suspected to have genetic origin or had a positive family history. Interestingly, the cases with pediatric onset and likely genetic origin show the longer diagnostic journey, which is probably likely due to the delayed genetic testing. So we believe that these findings support the idea that genetic testing should be considered more oftenly in adult undiagnosed disease patients. And I'm also collaborating with my colleague at Seoul National University, Professor Sang-Soo Bae, and on a project to enhance the diagnosis of repeat expansion disorders. So by integrating the Cas9 technology with nanopore sequencing, we have developed a long-read sequencing methods to detect repeat expansion disorders. And we further developed this to a multiplex method. So now we are able to screen 22 repeat expansion disorders all at once. So I believe that this will be extremely helpful for screening for some rare type of repeat expansion disorders. And there are several other research projects ongoing on the rare disease diagnostics, mainly led by Professor Che. And the national whole genome sequencing for rare diseases will continue for the next 5 years, covering more than 50,000 rare disease patients and families. And also a nationwide diagnosis platform for children and rapid NGS for critically ill patients are underway. So probably detailed results of these studies will be shared in the upcoming UDNI meeting. So I'd like to conclude by once again encouraging an active participation in the 2024 UDNI meeting at Seoul. I hope to meet many of you in Seoul. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moon. And if you've never had the opportunity to attend a UDNI meeting, it's a treat. It's a scientific treat. It's a cultural treat. And you heard about the cultural K-pop and other things in Korea. And it's just a wonderful time to network with colleagues, and many relationships, networking relationships have been established through those terrific meetings. Okay, so our next speaker then is Professor Shinya Yamamoto, who is at Baylor University and is very involved in the model organism work of the UDN. So Shinya, where are you? There you are.
Great, thank you so much, Alexa, and thank you for Helen and Mick, and also Amy for giving me the chance to talk here. I already booked my calendar for the Seoul event. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm from Baylor College of Medicine, and my day job is actually using fruit flies to do functional studies of a lot of variants that are seen in patients. But today, I'm going to be talking about the importance, actually, following Liam's talk about collaboration, facilitating collaborations through different efforts. One, I would like to introduce the Undiagnosed Hackathon that Bill actually talked about, touched upon initially, as well as the importance of developing new tools, and it will give you a glimpse of some things that we are working on, for example. So collaboration is really critical for a rare disease, and patients with undiagnosed conditions would typically go to hospitals and get a lot of services, but I think we can classify them into phenotyping, meaning they're trying to understand what the patient has in terms of different tests, including MRIs or blood tests or anything that you can do on the patient. And then also genotyping, getting their information about genetic and chromosomes and DNAs, and maybe including some expression analysis with RNA-seq. And integrating this information is what would lead to a differential diagnosis. For example, the expert would need to think about, is this a known condition? This patient has a known disease, or maybe diseases, because sometimes patients have two rare diseases that are blended together that you can't really understand just by the phenotyping. Or could this person have a very novel diseases that are not in the literature, and we might be seeing the first ever case that could be reported. And for all of this, we do need, it can't be a single person to do this. We need really experts, physicians that have a knowledge about the clinic, what's known in the literature, for example, also experience that have they seen this patient before, or clinical geneticists who can analyze these massive data sets, as well as bioinformaticians that can actually use these tools or develop these new tools, or biologists who have understanding of different genes and biological pathways and sort of context. And for example, if we need to understand whether this is a known disease or not, we really need to have all the experts with different knowledges to that knows the literature and also all the different possibility, even literature that only reports one patient or two patients in the world, and also the networks, referring to the right person to actually go see next, for example, if there's a suspicion, or if this is a completely novel disease, actually people like biologists who actually can understand, tell you about the function of a gene in flies or worms or mice, and then elaborate that into, does that explain what phenotypes of a patient? And all these people typically live in kind of silos and don't come to actually a meeting together. But this is where all these people need to get put in the same room and discuss about individual patients. So I think we've been really thinking about how can we further facilitate this collaboration, and also more importantly, to eliminate boundaries. And this is what, for example, the Wilhelm Foundation and the UDNI has been thinking for many years. And this actually was a kind of an experiment that happened in Stockholm last summer. The Undiagnosed hackathon, the first ever hackathon for undiagnosed condition, was in Stockholm and Karolinska University Hospital, where they brought 95 experts from 28 countries around the world to discuss 13 cases that was difficult to solve in individual countries. So we actually had experts, different kinds of expertise, like the people that I talked to you, and we were actually there for 48 hours and discussed these cases extensively. Out of this, I think we did really achieve multiple things. One was to really get everybody, clinicians, geneticists, bioinformaticians, programmers, biologists, all really working collaboratively without any hierarchies. I mean, this was very creative, I think, of the organizers. The name tag only showed their names and countries. They didn't talk about what expertise they had or the academic ranks, which was kind of irrelevant. They were actually also put in these children's stickers for, I had a unicorn sticker, but people had animals or dinosaurs or space or smiley marks. And we're just like, what are these? Oh, we actually were split into 5 different teams, so we can also not necessarily compete with each other, but having small groups with blended expertise come together, which was really a great way to work on it. Rich data set was made available for computational people to basically be able to bring their tools and analyze it on the spot. Some of them were a little bit complicated to do, so they were actually having analysis offsite, for example, but detailed clinical information were made possible. Short and long reads, whole genome sequencing with Illumina or nanopore sequencing, but both DNA and RNA was made available. Clinicians involved in the care were there to be on site to answer any questions. And for some of the patients from Sweden were actually present on site. So actually we can ask questions to their parents, or actually some of the pediatric people actually went to see the children's actually on the spot to actually see if there's any features that they could see. So for this 48 hours, 4 children received the diagnosis, which included, for example, cases where there was a known disease and a known variant, but this was the first potential case, an African descent case that had actually the specific syndrome. So the craniofacial presentation was different from what was actually shown in the Caucasian, for example. So I think we were learning a lot of different lessons. Some of the variants were in potential non-coding regions. So I think these cases are actually every case is giving a lesson. And investigations on the 7 remaining children and 2 adults are also going virtually. As Bill said, we're going to be having the second hackathon on June 7th to 8th at Nijmegen in Netherlands and Radboud UMC. And I think the sign up is actually also close to finishing, but if you're interested, please visit the website right there. And I think the importance is that sharing knowledge, tools, and idea without boundaries is really valuable. And this not only, I think, made positive effect on these 13 cases that we discussed, everybody that came to the meeting would brought back the lessons learned from this meeting to their individual countries. So there's a positive impact on diagnosis of many other patients who will be seen by any of these people that have. And so I think this is a very exciting event, and hopefully it would be something that, in addition to the annual meeting of the UDNI, people would be looking forward to attending. Other things that we're trying to do in our institute at Baylor College of Medicine is to try to facilitate collaboration by making information more available to people. We are developing kind of 3 tools. Well, one called Marvel. Actually, this has an extra R. So, so Google Marvel with 2 R's if you're interested in this one, instead of going to Spider-Man. But this is a general search engine for useful information. We try to integrate information from multiple different databases that are useful for the diagnosis of cases. And also, we more recently integrated the latest AI technology to develop a system where we can rank the variants that come out of exomes and whole genomes. And also, we've been developing a matchmaking tool called Model Match. Actually, my former student, Mike Harnish, is here. This was part of his PhD project, but we wanted to actually make a global registry of scientists with different expertise and then match them with the clinicians or patients or other stakeholders who are interested in the same gene to get them together and start catalyzing collaboration. This is in collaboration with our chief bioinformatic faculty, Zandong Liu at Baylor and Texas Children's. So give you a snapshot. I'm just breaking this down into like kind of little bits of windows, but Marvel, if you put in a gene of interest or variant of interest that you actually found in your exomes, will basically give you a lot of information. Kind of like this is, I'm calling this kind of like an Expedia or a kayak for rare diseases. It's like if you go on a vacation, you want to know what flight to take, which hotel to stay, which car to rent, which restaurant to go to. And these are information that are kind of scattered around in internet, but also made convenient for you in a single place. This is what Marvel basically try to do. We'll try to gather information about known disease gene association, what are the variants that are known to be associated, what is known about in the general population, and what we call control people that don't have these rare conditions. What are the different gene called in different model organisms? Do they even fly have the orthologous gene? And if they do, what is the phenotype? Where are they expressed? What do they do? Does my variant of interest affect the amino acid that's conserved evolutionarily? What is the protein structure and where does it fit? Or there's any drugs that work on these things? All this information, just by putting in your gene name or variant name, will get it to you, and it's actually freely available. We're also trying to upgrade this. We've been having conversation with people that received awards from the CZI Rare as One initiative to make this more also patient friendly, so that we can actually also summarize this information much more better for the people that needs that information. AI Marvel also took all this information that Marvel gathers and also try to simulate an expert, a clinical geneticist thought process to rank these variants and try to make it into a more streamlined process where we can, if you put in a VCF file with all the phenotypic information based on HBO term, we'll try to rank it. And this actually is performing much better than the existing tools for variant ranking. We just published this paper in this journal, New England Journal AI. And it's actually the link, if you take a photo there, it's actually freely available for the next month. So I hope everybody would actually try it. And also you can try out the web in the ai.marvel.org. Again, 2 R's right there too. And finally, Model Matcher, again, we try to ask scientists, what genes are you working on right now? What genes have you worked on? What genes are you interested in working on? People try to connect with people based on publication, but sometimes, they moved institutions or they're actually not working on that anymore. They kind of move their interest or they're having a very, very active project. They don't want their competitors to know, but they're willing to collaborate with patients who may have the disease in the gene. So the Model Matcher is a way to actually try to gather information from scientists. We just had a booth at a recent model organisms conferences and signed up 200 additional investigators to this website. And people can actually search this databases based on their gene of interest, or if the patient, scientists have confidential information, there's actually a matchmaking features. And this actually also, you can go to this website, matchmaker.net, for networking. So what we really want to do is actually not just live in silos, but actually break down all these barriers. And we also are trying to collaborate with other initiatives to try to kind of bring this initiative together. I think the clinical research community and especially the rare disease family community have this Venn diagram where there is an overlap, but I think the scientific research community especially kind of lives out of this bubble. So we were trying to push this in with them and then collecting together with the clinical community and rare disease patients. We really want to actually make this together. So really thank you to the people, especially for the hackathon, Mick and Helene, as well as Orion from Phenotyps, who actually organized this event. And special thanks to the hackathon organizing team, the local people, and from Karolinska and Wendy from Radboud in the Netherlands for the next one. The Undiagnosed Disease Network International, I think the Diagnosis Working Group, Lorenzo is going to be talking about it, but also very, very thank you to the patient and family also who participated and shared their data with us for this event as well. Also the acknowledgement of the Marvel Model Matcher team. This is not everybody, but I just wanted to thank everybody. And then if you are interested in these tools or the events, please just take a photo or screenshot of these. And if you have any questions, just email me. So thank you so much.
If any of you in the room is new to the undiagnosed community, you'll see that was just a wonderful example of collaboration and what can happen when people get together, when technology is used. and so on. So thank you, Shinya. So our next speaker is Steve Ecker, Professor Steve Ecker, who is the first inaugural director of the Children's Center for Rare Diseases at Dell Medical School in Austin, Texas.
I really want to thank everybody for the opportunity to tell you our very beginning story. But I want to start, Bill, you put the note on. So many in this group might be a little surprised that in 2013, for a while, Bill wasn't being paid because his bosses were unhappy. And that was because of the government shutdown. And I was helping run a precision medicine conference in Toronto. And my entry into all this was I had to be Bill presenting his slides in Toronto. And you may not even remember this, but getting the Rare Disease Canada program getting started in Toronto. And so that was a wonderful time in 2013. And then he connected with me and said he knew about this family in Sweden that was really excited about making this UDNI. So that's the origin of how I'm connected in this space. But today I'm going to tell you about what's going on this last year, about 6 months of my time, but many years of work, including Leah Harris. Dr. Harris is here for getting a Center for Rare Disease in Austin, Texas. Okay, so I don't need to convince you why this is a key concept for rare and undiagnosed diseases to this audience. Our goals are to build out and support patients and families and the Odyssey, and to lead at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm going to explain why this is important. So Texas is a 30 million citizen state. We are adding 500,000 citizens a year. It's a massive. Austin is the 10th largest city in the country and is predicted to be the 3rd largest after LA and New York by 2040. The University of Texas is actually 14 campuses, of which Austin is the flagship. UT is a top 10 public research university, but until 10 years ago did not have a medical school. And so I moved 1,000 miles because this was an opportunity to work with the likes of Leah and others, the University of Texas, to integrate a rare disease science from the ground up. And this is not an analogy, it's literal. This is a shot from a few days ago. Outside of my office window, this is the old Urban Center, which used to be a basketball court, and it's being torn down for 2 new hospitals in Austin. An adult specialty hospital and a partnership with UT MD Anderson. And this is the opportunity to, at the charter, we build these out, rare diseases. So that's not a usual opportunity. There are not very many new medical schools get built out, not many medical campuses, and almost none in a top 10 city in the United States. Okay, so 2.5 billion has been committed to this build out. And I looked at this as that opportunity to do discovery impact in rare disease. And so you may say, well, why am I here? Because you don't have your buildings, you have your stuff. Actually, I'm not talking about the children. I'm gonna talk about half of our kids with rare diseases. And all these, but 10 to 30% of NICU admissions have genetic conditions. And it turns out that we can do this in Austin. Texas has the 2nd largest pediatric population in the country. And we actually have a hospital and a research base. So Dell Children's was started a little before the medical school and is a wonderful hospital. Leah has been president for a while, as well as her role as head of pediatrics. Here she is in the middle, giving us a wonderful tour as I was bringing my lab down from Mayo. And across the street is the Dell Pediatric Research Institute, where I put my lab. So we're across the street. We have everything in terms of infrastructure to do this, except getting ourselves organized. And that's what we've been doing. And I just want to tell you a brief story. So I'm in Texas. I'm trying to become Texican, whatever you want to call us. So I have a star, 5-part star. And in the middle is the Dell Medical Center. That's our donation. But I want to tell you a story because we're not operational, but we are. Okay, so within a few weeks of getting launched, a family in Austin had their daughter with her 3rd episode and was already stumping the physicians, had been in, diagnosis was incomplete at best, although it turns out to actually be right, which is really odd, but connected with the fact that we had announced the center through our connection with the Firefly Fund, which gave us a $5 million gift to get started, but also this network. That network includes families, includes foundations, including Casey McPherson's, who's Cure Rose Foundation. He's also started two biotechs to go after rare diseases. So Everlum joined. Everlum was able to consent to the family and also had this novel called a mobile phlebotomist. So I don't have to deal with MTAs. And so you can actually get the data. The data can be processed in Everlum and then sent. They had a connection with PacBio. PacBio was willing to sequence this and get the information. By the way, I will not go back to short read sequencing. Long read sequencing is so much better as a scientist trying to analyze the data, not just structural variants, but just basically SNPs. It's still so much better to deal with. And then we were able to sort it out and return the results back to the family. It turns out it was a family of 4. All 4 had different genotypes. All 4 of those genotypes had important medical information for not just the daughter that was in the case, but the 2 parents, because the heterozygous alleles have differential impacts on them as adults, okay? We did this all in 2 weeks. The actual standard CLIA certified test is still not returned. That's why I can't tell you anything about this, because all of this was done where we had this match of the foci. I really believe that we can reset this. This is a group. All of us were working together to make this happen. So it's a true story. It's what we're hoping to build and scale. Okay, so I was bringing Helen in 7 years ago now. Helen and I were having a conversation at one of these UDNI meetings. I'm not sure, can't quite sure. I know it was about 7 years ago. And you were saying that diagnoses is important, and that's here, and it's very important. But what we're going to need are medicines, but really are going to be building it out. And I actually have been working very hard in that space in many ways. And the opportunity in Austin is there because I can activate the entire University of Texas at Austin partnerships, even though I don't have centers, we don't even have a human genetics department. Why is that? I have an unusual role. I'm Associate Dean of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Del Med and on the main campus. And I believe that we're going to solve this problem by doing what I call the 3B model of translation. Most people think of translation as bench to bedside, but in reality, it's bench to business to bedside. And we know those partners are going to be critical. And so I've helped set up, there's a program called the Texas Health Catalyst where we actually support challenges for teams. We also do a match, an external match with key partners. And we launched a challenge this spring for rare diseases, from diagnoses to treatments. Ask me next Friday, I'll tell you how many applications we have to build this challenge out. I've been partnering with pharmacy as well as a business school called Nexus, where we actually put out a challenge. There's a great group in pharmacy for delivery. We're making an inhalable, hopefully an inhalable antibiotic to replace an IV antibiotic for a classic case of rare diseases. It's about activating these different arms. And then we are launching a startups incubator space, which Everlum is hopefully going to be our first participant. And it's going to be housed at the Dell Pediatric Research Institute behind my lab. Hopefully have more startups. And then there's a broader base campus on 10. So this is all about taking rare disease and putting it in front of some amazing people there in Austin. And I'm hoping that this activates our whole Longhorn campus as we build this out. Okay, this was a discussion last night. I think last week, for those due to therapies, if you haven't caught it, last week was the announcement of an open CRISPR system. It was fully compatible with Cas9. This resets the conversation. It means it's the equivalent of having Linux for gene therapy. It's going to be really profound in how we hopefully greatly expedite gene therapy technologies that use CRISPR. So I want to thank you. Thank you for your time. I want to thank everybody for your collaboration these last 10 years as I moved from Mayo to Austin. And I hope I've explained why we're hoping to be doing really great things in Austin and next door to Houston and Dallas and other colleagues there in Texas. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. This notion of bringing in business is critical. It's something that we haven't fully focused on. Obviously, we're an undiagnosed, we're all about diagnosis. But as has been said also by other speakers, what next? And I think you're quite right. So thank you, and thank you for leading that effort. So our next speaker is going to be Professor Dr. Lorenzo Botto from the University of Utah School of Medicine, and he's going to be talking about a working group, a UDNI working group.
Thank you very much, and it's the first time I've been called Professor Doctor. I'm quite impressed. Quite impressed. Thank you, thank you. I'm actually delighted to present some highlights from the work of the UDNI diagnostic working group, which some have actually described perhaps as hope without borders. But let me temper this first. I think it's essential to essential to approach our work with a mindset of hope without a hype, as over promising can actually be detrimental to everyone involved, and especially parents and and especially patients and their families. We are starting small, one step at the time in the UDNI, and it's fueled mainly by the passion of a large team of professionals from across, as you will see, various continents who are volunteering their time and resources too, as we will see in a minute. So our approach from the start has involved careful planning, assembling the right teams, and trying to utilize the best tools, as some of which have been already described, and also being guided by a clear vision. Our approach revolves around teams, tools, and tactics, and the teams, which are fundamental to our efforts, try to bring together a set of cognitive skills and vast experience. Since such rare conditions as we have seen are so rare, no one is the expert in all of them. So we focus on collaborative diagnostics, where the team will converge to share ideas, to plan tests, to share resources. And it's all coordinated by an international group of people from Sweden, UK, and Turkey here, Dr. Anne Norgreen, Emma Palmer, and Fulya Talyan. The patients are typically referred from clinical sites and other UDPs, and are often routed through organizations such as the Wilhelm Foundation. So essentially, we operate as a virtual consultation hub for healthcare professionals. And this is because there are these local teams who know the patients well and will continue their care after our consultation. The referring clinician provides information in a structured way, and more about that in a minute. They will present the case at regularly scheduled diagnostic meetings, during which these groups, the UDNI members who are part of the diagnostic working groups from multiple countries and time zones, will participate in the discussions to generate ideas, to share resources to help interpret findings. And so we've done things such as exchanging the genome data for reanalysis, And also, as part of this, there have been volunteers who will be sequencing say samples for patients who come from places where resources are not available. And also the timing will change of these meetings, since we have experts from all over the world, and so we all suffer in turn for some of these meetings. So we talked about the teams. In terms of the tools, we have some tools to support this work. We started out with a platform in our protected area in the UDNI website, supported by the Italian Ministry of Health. And then to support information, we have looked at a number of review tools, and Dr. Anne Norgren's team has developed the tip to toe, which is a data entry tool that you can see here, and that allows both to have the clinician to structure the information, and also to generate HPO terms for analysis. Looking ahead, we are excited about to implement a new collaboration tool developed by Frameshift Genetics and the University of Utah through the generosity of Alistair Ward, who you can see here, and Gabriel Marth. And the idea is to enhance our ability to analyze phenotype and suggest plausible genetic correlation for clinical review. But for example, this is a case who I had followed, in which this young man who was on a 10-year diagnostic odyssey was able to be diagnosed, and as you can see here, by the combination of a few of his main findings, which affected the bones and the brain. And we were able to focus on a specific region in one of these genes, which were confirmed to be the diagnostic. And this helped this young man to do some specific evaluation and uncover certain issues, clinical issues that he hadn't known about, and that would require some very specific clinical and imaging follow-up. So this system, which is codenamed Calypso in the UDN, and more generally it's a Mosaic outside of the UDN, actually does more than the visual interrogation of variants. There's a whole as a system of clinical interface, and it's built precisely as a collaboration tool. This interface allows the various members of the teams to speak to each other, to document their thoughts, to integrate also the main clinical information, and the visual aspect of the analysis of the DNA is such that you don't need to be a bioinformatician in order to look at your data. So finally, say tactics and say vision. I think that ultimately this group will be deemed successful to the extent that it can share and grow skills worldwide and distribute resources such as testing where needed. I mean, we cannot solve the inequities and the disparities in the world, but we can do our share one step at a time. For quite some time now, we have intentionally reached out to the UDNI champions that you've heard about in low resource areas. Imagine that Pakistan, with 240 million people has only 2 trained geneticists and a handful of genetic counselors. And so to paraphrase an old saying, the critical notion, I think, is that in the end, what's truly important is learning to fish, spreading that knowledge and capacity rather than just handing out fish. And I think this is the lofty and essential goal that's being spearheaded by the Wilhelm Foundation. I mentioned at the beginning the vision of a tip without a tail. Undiagnosed disease programs have often been termed to represent the cutting edge, sort of the tip of the arrow or the tip of the spear. However, in genetics and technology, I think we must ensure that our advances do not leave vulnerable population behind. So as we move forward with all of the excellent things and important things that we have heard, I think we need to intentionally work towards making sure that this arrow is not growing longer. And so embedded in our goals, I think, should be and is a commitment to equitable advances to healthcare, having this tip without a tail. So in closing, I'm profoundly grateful to all of our team members who contribute tirelessly across, say, time zones, offering not only their time, but their resources and passion to push and to break boundaries and to foster what I think is a truly inclusive community care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you, Lorenzo spoke about one working group, and it's a very active working group. There are multiple working groups that have been formed as part of the UDNI. And if you're interested, take a look at the website and you'll see what they all are doing. And I want to emphasize that, yeah, this is collaboration, people coming together. This is voluntary. So people are coming together voluntarily because they have a passion, as you said, about what they do. So, so kudos to everyone who's involved. So I would say now, and we're right on time. Now what we're going to do is take a lengthy 5-minute break. So there's some coffee and drinks out there, but really do try to come back at 10:50, and we're going to have a fascinating panel who will be talking to us about various things. Okay, great. Panelists could take seats up in front, please. I don't think so. I mean, I'll be giving general questions and then, yeah, so. I think we're still missing a couple of panelists. I wasn't going to name names. So I think everyone is here. Okay, well, this is going to be a very interesting panel discussion. I have a list of 7 questions. I think the panelists have all seen the questions. So I think we'll just get started. And first, I would like it if you would all introduce yourselves and tell us how you got involved in the community. Now, we've heard from some of you already, but by all means, please do so. So why don't we start with Helene? So if you just say just a couple of words.
My name is Helen Sederoth, and I started this since when my 3 children died from, my 3 youngest children died from an undiagnosed disease. And we are trying to do whatever we can to do to help the families around the globe to get the diagnosis.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope so. I'm Tanisha Washington. I am at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'll talk a lot about community engagement. I looked into this space, I say, almost about 10 years ago, and I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get into the conversation.
Great, thank
My
you.
name is Amy Gray. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation. I spent my career over 20 years in nonprofit healthcare philanthropy, working in the rare disease space and working with many families that were searching for a diagnosis. It was really an honor for me to join the foundation about a year ago to help build this community and this foundation here in the US for patients living with undiagnosed diseases.
Hi, my name is Christine McGarvey. I am a UDNF peer member. I am also the Pennsylvania State Ambassador for the National Organization of Rare Disorders. I myself am a UDN participant. I am also the mother of a UDN participant. And just recently, my mom became suddenly ill with a undiagnosed disease and is on hospice. So hi, Mom. I love you. I'm doing this for you. I got involved in advocacy work because living with an undiagnosed disease is extremely difficult. And I finally felt like I was able to tread water and I wanted to help other people. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Feig. I'm a senior genetic counselor and site coordinator for the Harvard clinical site of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network at Brigham and Women's Hospital specifically. We have 3 hospitals that are part of our site, also MGH and Boston Children's. So definitely as a genetic counselor, I have training and interest in patient care, advocacy efforts, and definitely, understanding the importance and the value often of having a diagnosis and what that can mean in terms of somebody's medical care or access to care, as well as just their, own experiences and, the toll that it can take and the burden of not having a diagnosis for those patients.
I'm Bill Gall. I'm a pediatrician, a clinical geneticist, a biochemical geneticist. I work at the NIH. I've studied metabolic diseases and then rare diseases and now undiagnosed diseases.
Hello, I'm Shinya Yamamoto. I'm an assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine. I think I entered this field in the most weird way. I was originally trained as a veterinarian at University of Tokyo. I came to the US at Baylor to learn fly genetics because I was very passionate about understanding basic mechanism of development using model organism. And during my PhD, I stumbled upon, we did a big screen to look for new genes that nobody knows what it's doing in the fly nervous system. And it turns out a lot of these genes are actually conserved in humans, and many of them are already associated with rare diseases. So we actually reasoned that many unstudied genes in flies are actually good candidates for human disease genes. And then we become more proactive about trying to find a patient who actually match our flies. And actually, during the process, we learned that flies and model organisms are very great tools to do functional studies. Also, it could be leveraged to try to test therapies and mechanism. And I've been really seeing how separated the basic scientific field is from clinical genetics field, and we're trying to engage in more collaborations. Thank you.
Great. So this is a terrific group. And so the first question here is, and I'll just read it, but considering the diverse experiences within the undiagnosed community, that's patients, caregivers, researchers, clinicians, and so on, how can we better foster collaboration internationally and otherwise that builds bridges and breaks down barriers? But with the emphasis here, we've heard a lot about collaboration, but with the emphasis on addressing the specific needs of each group. So I wonder, Tanisha, would you mind starting and maybe
Sure.
saying something about that?
Sure, awesome. So I mentioned that I lucked up into rare disease. I was a PhD student at the time, kind of same experience. Was asked about diversity in a clinical trial that they were running. And at the time, just recognized that this is typically how we do the things that we do, right? As researchers, we have our research question, we come up with our ideas and our aims, but we rarely bring people to the table to kind of discuss what that actually looks like in real life. And I would argue that many of us end up having recruitment issues along the way, right? And then we say, hey, how do we get more people to participate? One of the things that we've done, and I want to piggyback on this idea of translational science and add that fourth pillar, which would be community engagement. And I think that's huge because what we've learned is that people don't necessarily identify with the term rare disease. Many of us do just because we've been in the space or undiagnosed. People don't really resonate with that. So how do you reach people where they are to kind of engage them? And I love this idea of the patient navigators, and that's kind of our approach. So our idea is to think about community health workers. You all may be familiar with that term. We actually we call them community health ambassadors in the work that we do. So our goal was to engage pastors, congregations. We were starting predominantly with African-American communities, building this framework with them and then building that out. So we have an active program in Kansas City. We also have an active program in Alabama, which is where I'm based, where we have trained community health workers really around this core concept of rare disease and how do you meet people in the rare disease space. And we started out with these very broad ideas. So of course we want to talk about rare disease, but people may not, because they don't understand rare disease, come to a rare disease event. So what does that look like? We're going to bring counselors, we're going to bring mental health individuals to talk about mental health. And then we're going to talk about what it feels like to have an undiagnosed disease or a rare disease for your mental health. And engage people that way. And then they start saying, you know what? Treat them like people, first of all, humanity. Hey, let's build this relationship. And as we build this relationship, how do we engage you more? So maybe you are going through a diagnostic odyssey. You didn't know who you should talk to, but now that you have a relationship with us, how do we build that into the work that we're doing? So many of you may be familiar with Dr. Bruce Korf at UAB. He is running our undiagnosed disease program. So we have been in talks about how do we build out this community health ambassador framework, not just in Birmingham, but also in other places. And then how do we tailor that framework for not just African Americans? How do we tailor it and meet people where they are in the Asian community? How do we meet people where they are in the Hispanic community? And again, to your point, globally, how do we build these frameworks around what people actually need versus the researcher in me thinking about my research question? So that's what we've been trying to do. And it's actually been going well, but I'll wait to allow other people to talk.
That's terrific because we don't always talk about the community, the broader community. We do as a group, we do outreach, but that's not exactly what you're talking about. So I think that we need to take advantage of the communities that there are. Churches are wonderful places where communities are built and other kinds of community work. So thank you. Yes. So Elizabeth, maybe from the perspective of a clinician, you could talk a little bit more about what we might do here.
Yeah, I think having, I mean, I think that was a good example of like reaching the patients, right? And making sure that we are recruiting patients from different communities and different population groups and you know, making people aware of the programs or services that we have. I think on the kind of clinical research side, having clinicians or researchers that, you know, kind of have a foot in both camps, if you will, or can represent both sides. I think, you know, a lot of what I find my job is kind of coordinating or following up with people or, you know, setting up meetings with the researchers and the clinicians. I don't always have a, you know, even 50%, but definitely not 100% understanding of the fully, you know, medical side or the fully research side, but enough to kind of facilitate those conversations and be able to advocate for the patient as the person that we're all working on, you know, helping and finding an answer for and contributing to their care. So kind of pushing that process forward through, you know, sometimes just collaborating or reaching out or kind of keeping those connections moving forward throughout that process. Again, across the kind of clinical side to the research side.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll just move right into the next question because it relates to exactly what you were saying. And I'm going to ask you, Christine, maybe to say the first words about this. How can we empower undiagnosed patients and their families to become active participants in their own diagnostic journey? Many of them are already quite active, but how can we empower them to do that and contribute meaningfully to research efforts, which of course it has to go both ways. But Christine, your thoughts?
So I think the most important thing, and I think about this too when I go to the doctor's office, is that a doctor cannot help me without me telling them what's wrong, what my symptoms are. And that's very important for the undiagnosed patient, right? You need to be your own advocate. You are the expert in your body. You are the only person that is most likely going through the things that you are going through, and that should empower you. And these people are here to help you. The UDN, the UDNI, all these people are working tirelessly to help undiagnosed patients.
Would you, just as a follow-up, is there a way to reach more patients to have them understand that there are these resources out there and so on? Do you have some thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I think the work that the UDNF is doing with like Together on Tuesdays, the Facebook group, that is helping reach out to the broader community. Also, I just know myself, when I'm out interacting with people, I share that I have an undiagnosed disease, and that leads to discussion because a lot of times when I talk to people about my illness and I tell them that I'm undiagnosed, they don't understand that. They're used to, you know, going to the doctor and you get a treatment and it's resolved. And so I think sharing your story is very important.
Great, thank you. And maybe, oh, Bill, please.
I just wanted to interject that the Undiagnosed Diseases Network has a patient portal at which, on which patients tell their stories. I think there are over 200 patients who've told their stories there. This is certainly empowering and brings people together over the particular symptoms. And I think it helps not only the patients to be part of the community, but it helps the researchers to know who might be a suitable person to pursue in terms of finding second cases and putting together a particular phenotype with a genetic diagnosis. So I would give kudos to the UDN for having that portal.
And do take a look at the website there. It's quite powerful and it's structured information that is, the UDN works with the patients to pull that information together and in a comparable way so that you can look across patients. You know, one of the goals that we talked about early on in this program was how do we get beyond n equals 1? So in other words, you know, n of 1, I should say, n of 1, which is when you are undiagnosed by definition, there's only you, you know, as you were saying, and how do we get beyond that? And that's one of many ways that we we have tried to address that problem. But Amy, I wonder if you want to contribute to this conversation too.
Yeah, I would just like to underscore one of the things that we hear quite a bit from community members is how empowering it can be to share their story. And so we at the foundation are always trying to find ways where families can share their story with us and with others. Recently, we've been able to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with legislators to advocate for more funding for undiagnosed programs, for changes in policy that would help pay for, things like rapid whole genome sequencing and, other things that are important to our community. And so, we will continue to try to find ways to bring patients' voice and perspective to those meetings and encourage them to join us in those efforts. One of the navigators, Mary, who you probably received an email from today for our event, has this idea of putting a book together of patient stories for our community. And so I think that's one of the projects this next year that we would like to launch, in a way to have it be somewhat therapeutic for families to learn how to tell their story and empower them in the power that comes with sharing their story more broadly with others in the community.
Helene, and then Gina.
For us, it's very important also to give families the opportunity to tell their stories and to also to have a opportunity to show their phenotypes. And now we are working with the tools that Lorenzo talked about, the tip to toe, to make that possible for patients, for families to use too, so they can bring their own phenotypes into this tip to toe, and then it will be translated to HBO terms, and they can give to researchers and when they go to doctors to show that this is my problem. And
yeah, let me just, for those people, actually HPO has been mentioned several times today. It's a human phenotype ontology. And what it is it's a structured terminology that again allows you to compare patient to patient rather than wading through, as all of the clinicians do, but wading through all of the medical records. But this is a winnowing down, if you like, of what are the key characteristics of this condition. And that's why the HPO has been so powerful. Sheena, did you want to say something on this?
I also wanted to, from a scientist point of view, it's also very valuable to have direct interaction with patients and families. Michelle actually talked about this Mitchell syndrome patient holding a fly vial. Actually, we do sometimes have patients that we give a diagnosis or we're contributed to the diagnosis, or we're in the process of actually working on their specific variant. Let them come to the lab, talk to us, talk to the PI, talk to the graduate students and postdocs who are working on the case. Then they get to hear the story from the first hand. And that's actually not only is informative scientifically, but emotionally. It really puts a face on the genes that we work on. So I think that's actually a drive for the scientists, because I think scientists actually work for, data and paper publication, but they also think that, well, many of the things that we do, in traditional science, we don't necessarily see the impact, right? Because you publish a paper and maybe 20 years down the road, someone would pick it up and then find something more interesting. But here, there's an opportunity for science to make direct impact on somebody's lives. And I think that's also very rewarding for us. So that's something that you can't really convert to like number of papers or other things that we actually are evaluated for.
Okay. I'd like to emphasize how important it is for people to tell their stories by telling this story. Let's say the year is 2013 or so, and I asked the NIH for $20 million a year to run an undiagnosed diseases network for the country. They say, get out of the room. I mean, there's no chance that I could ever have started this program if it weren't for the fact that in the prior years, individuals with undiagnosed diseases had told their stories on Discovery Channel, on 60 Minutes, on all the broadcasts, radio and the press, etc. Those stories shamed the NIH into continuing the program and funding it at roughly $20 to $25 million a year for 10 years. Zero chance without the patients being involved in telling their stories.
Yeah, sorry to jump in on this, but I think it's a great question. And yeah, just on talking about advocacy and empowerment, I think on the clinical side, just understanding and recognizing that advocacy is work and it's a job and it's often learned for all patients, but that there are barriers that exist, especially for some patients. And that might be gender dependent, that might be different racial and ethnic minority groups. And so just understanding the kind of historical and current practices of medical racism and systems of oppression that are perpetuated and reinforced through clinical practices. So recognizing that as an area where, we might need to play a more active role or kind of understand the history and context and experiences that patients have had to better support them and help them advocate for themselves, because that might not be the same experience, across patients and identities. And in terms of empowerment, I think, even just when we're thinking about the clinical UDN evaluations and what that looks like, I work with all adult patients and often they've had pretty extensive, prior workups and prior evaluations. And so it's great when our clinical team is very excited and we have a lot of ideas, but patients have often been through invasive procedures or invasive tests before. It might be something that our team is like, well, we might as well, repeat or do it again. And that might not be something that a patient wants to do. I think patients often feel kind of pressured, or this might be kind of a last option for them, or really a high stakes research program to be accepted in. And so I think feeling the pressure of, I need to do anything that they want, I need to do everything possible. And so finding the balance between what do we think and have a realistic expectation that this will give us valuable new information, and what can we go back and get, existing tissue from or the results of. And, that might be more work than just doing it again. But I think, meeting patients where they are and making sure that we're coming up with a plan that we think is necessary, informative, and works with the goals and values of that patient.
So following up on this notion of empowerment, patient empowerment, what are your thoughts on patients owning their own data? And what might be some of the, so in other words, owning having their own data to make it easier to share data. So what are your thoughts on what might be the benefits and the possible risks of this? Does anyone would like to take that question?
Personally, I think it's a great idea because patients themselves become like stakeholders in their own healthcare. And for me, when I see, like probably most undiagnosed patients see multiple specialists, and one of the things that I do as part of my care coordination is bringing other specialist records to my appointment, because it's not just one system that's malfunctioning, right? It's a whole body that we're looking at. And so I think that's definitely a huge benefit. The con is that I'm sure most undiagnosed patients have spent a lot of time on Google. And so that could be a con that
they might see things there that are inaccurate or cause them additional worry and stress and so on. Yeah. Bill, go ahead.
So I certainly favor patients owning their own data, especially genetic data. We've had several cases in which we wanted to know information about a patient. Patient wanted us to have the information. We asked the doctor says, no, I'm prohibited because of either HIPAA regulations or else countries' laws that don't allow those data, especially some of the European countries have this as an issue. So the way around that, of course, is to have the patient get the information from the hospital, the doctor, and then send it to whomever the patient wants to send it to. There is a slight and probably not very often seen complication that has to do sometimes with an advocacy group that wants to own all the data for themselves, for their patients too. So these are not this is a little bit of a different story. It's a story where the advocacy group wants to hold everything, and sometimes they want to hold it maybe to the detriment of the individual patient who's a part of that advocacy group. There was a time, probably about 10, 15 years ago, in which an advocacy group was part of the finding of a gene, and they attempted to patent the gene. And because of that, nobody was able to sequence that gene to make molecular diagnoses on individuals who had this disorder for about 5 or 6 years. So that, but of course, what that was, in my opinion, was misuse of the information that they had. But I strongly favor people owning their own information.
Helene, did you want to weigh in on this?
For patients around the world, I think it would be amazing to own their own data, since, as Bill says, it's so many who hides, or there is laws that you can't share the data. But if patients own their own data, you can share it to everyone. And so I think it's the only way. But as Bill says, we have to be careful. So to have how we can do this so that when someone doesn't take care of all the data and lock it in.
Exactly. And
Yes.
as you know, as being part of an international community, every country, every region has different laws, and it makes it more and more difficult, to share data across
Yes.
borders and so on. So this is one way of
Yes.
ensuring that we could share data more broadly.
And in Sweden, which is a very small country, we have 10 million people. We have 21 regions, and we can't share data to the next region. So even in the country, it can be difficult.
Indeed.
And for Europe, it's it's almost impossible to share data.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, let's move on, unless somebody wanted to say something else.
I'll say something really quick. I think a lot
Yes.
of that is about communication across all of the entities that are involved in these conversations. So for example, if a patient advocacy organization is working with a researcher, understanding from the researcher perspective, if their university is going to then own the data that comes into that university. So I think it goes back to what I was mentioning at the beginning. When these conversations start, people should be at the table that don't just represent the university, or they don't just represent the patient advocacy organization. They represent a conglomerate of all these different partners, so that people are educated on what this actually means when you sign a partnership with the researcher or a hospital, what that means in terms of your data, and will you have access to it? So I think a lot of it goes to transparency, and a lot of it goes to making sure these people are at the table to have those conversations before they sign off that they're going to be a part of a study or whatever that looks like. And a lot of people don't know that that's the policy. They participate in something, they sign an IRB, but the IRBs are very lengthy, as we all know, especially for a clinical trial. They're not aware of what that really looks like. And it's like, hey, I want to be a part of it, so I'm going to sign off. And then after the fact, when you want your data, you don't realize what the constraints are because you weren't aware.
Right, and that's part of the work of the data sharing working group of the UDNI, is addressing some of those issues. And maybe we move on to this question about what role can technological advancements, for example, AI, we've heard a little bit about that, but telemedicine is a certain kind of, technological advancement. What role can they play in improving access to diagnostic tools and expertise for undiagnosed patients, but particularly in underserved regions? Does anyone want to speak to that first?
I can speak to the kind of telehealth and telemedicine. I think that's a great area of development. I think we were kind of forced into it through the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think it did allow us to demonstrate that this can be a really effective model of providing patient care and providing patient evaluation. So I know for our Brigham Harvard UDN clinical team, we completed a few different evaluations, or at least parts of it, for patients through telemedicine. And one patient in particular, we were able to send her prior to the evaluation date a at-home kind of portable ultrasound machine. And so she was able to, like, at home, ultrasound her own thyroid and like do some basic imaging guided by the physician. So we were not only like collecting history and kind of doing some basic physical exam just by, looking at her on camera, but also have some like ultrasound data and results of imaging studies done that way. So there are definitely, I think, creative ways, novel ways that we can be implementing, different parts of clinical care that we never thought could be done in that way, just because we never needed to or were trying to. So definitely, I think it's an exciting area that just makes everything that we can do and offer much more accessible to patients.
Thank you. Yes, Shinya.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in AI, but I have a little bit of experience with the AI Marvel. And I think all these tools are really developing rapidly. As you can see, it's like you've been amazed with, like, for example, ChatGPT and all the images that you can synthesize. And I think it's going to start moving into the, obviously, we're exploring how, like, ChatGPT, and can we actually train them to actually be the clinical geneticists to give the diagnosis if we give them enough data and training set. And I think all these things are just going to be a rapid, and a lot of these programs that are coming, coming up over the next, like, even like 1, 2, 3 years, for example. Implemented, I think there's also a limitation of that, obviously, and the AI can be smart as much as the data you put in. So for example, some of the things that AI Marvel is doing, we're actually, having a training set from clinically diagnosed cases, obviously, from a clinical genetic lab at Baylor Genetics, and train the system. We've actually used diagnosed patients from the UDN to kind of to train the system to actually build an accurate model and also mimic the thought process of a clinical geneticist going through that to come up with the best way that we think that, what the machine can actually achieve diagnosis. Well, the thing there is that the data sets obviously are biased in a way that, it is actually enriched for Caucasian, white people's background. So, diversity, the genetic background is not represented well enough in the training data set. Also, what we call them the control data sets, where, you need to tell the machine this is not a disease, this is a disease for this specific phenotype. I think all the data is not diverse enough for capturing all the population. There's hope for us, obviously, all of us is, for example, sequencing a million Americans with across different backgrounds. And I think there's more and more these data that's actually produced from ethnically and genetically different backgrounds. So I think these tools would be good, but it's not going to be, fine-tuned for everyone's use. And I think in order to actually, train the AI, we really need more data, and then that actually could be related to how portable and how accessible these data are and how shareable these are.
Yeah, the All of Us program that Shinya referenced is an NIH-funded program that has, as the raison d'etre, the thing that you have to do is you have to share those data. And so that is already the way it's set up. So anyone who participates there knows that they will be sharing it. I'm talking particularly about the researchers, not so much about the patients who are actually, this is actually the public, so it's not just patients who are involved. So we are unfortunately beginning to run out of time, but I'm going to combine the last two questions and see if we can get some words of wisdom from each one of you about this. So today we diagnose about 40%, 30 to 40% of the undiagnosed diseases, which means that a large percentage will be unsolved. What are your suggestions for turning those numbers around? And that then relates to, what is the landscape of undiagnosed diseases going to look like in 5 years or 10 years? So whatever order you'd like to go in, or I'll just start with Elaine. You want to start, and then we'll just go down the road.
Thank you. We would like to highlight more. We think that if we do more collaboration and reach out to more families with undiagnosed diseases, we can to collaborate with, we can solve this together, but we have to solve this together, and we need all of you to solve these undiagnosed diseases. And I think about 5 to 10 years, I think we can do it. We have switched that, so we can say 60% are now solved. Now we have to look at these 40%.
Okay, I support that.
Great.
Okay, Tanisha next.
I think that's such a loaded question. I'll try to answer it quickly. I think that in order to do it and to do it in a way that is equitable, there are a lot of things that we need to do. And one of that is to talk about the clinical trial process and what that looks like, to talk about the history behind the clinical trial process that's very recent in terms of how people have been traumatized in healthcare. So first, acknowledge that. I would also say that people that we talk to in terms of trust, it's really not about the history. Oftentimes, is that people haven't asked them, just because biases that exist in healthcare, to participate in different clinical trials in order to have access to a lot of different things. In addition to that, I think it goes back to, again, meeting people where they are. I think when we think about the next 10, what are we in? I'll go beyond 10 years, because we do know by 2045-ish or so, the demographics of the United States is going to shift dramatically. And with that being said, all of this information that we're gathering, to the point at the end, if we don't have phenotypes that represent a variety of individuals, a lot of the data that we're collecting right now is not going to be meaningful in the next 15 to 20 years. So I think when I start conversations with people that are researchers, the buy-in is that the data that we're collecting right now, if we don't shift the way that we're doing things and include a lot of different people, that data is not going to make sense to us in another 20, 25 years. Therapeutics are not going to be effective for different populations if they're not included in the information that we have so far. So I think that's the huge incentive. If you're not already, the buy-in is humanity, that the incentive is those publications are going to decrease because in the next, that's 20 or so years, the population is definitely going to be shifting. And we know that the majority population right now will be a part of the minority population. So if we have data just on this population predominantly, we're going to be really at a lack of what needs to happen for future
And it's a
purposes.
problem today. It'll be a problem, even a
Exactly.
bigger problem
Yes.
in the future. So Amy, did you
I would
want to?
just add, I agree with everything the two panelists just said. Collaboration is absolutely key. We need to continue to advocate for funding for undiagnosed diseases, for rare disease research. That's something we can all do together. And we need to continue to help support patients and families along their journey and continue to roll out programs like our patient navigation program and other programs that will support patients every step of the way.
So I'm all about creating smart goals. So in 5 years, I would like broader awareness of undiagnosed diseases. So that way, when I meet someone and I tell them I have an undiagnosed disease, there's a greater understanding of that. And in 10 years, which I think is doable, given these advances we're talking about, especially with AI in medicine, I would like to see those numbers flipped, where we have 60% diagnosed and 40% undiagnosed.
I think you have general agreement here. Actually, but let's say, 70%. Let's set a goal here, Go ahead.
I think that the kind of traditional clinical genetic testing model is very much phenotype to genotype. We have a patient with different, medical problems or features that we don't understand, can't characterize well, and we look for a genetic answer. And maybe we get one, maybe we don't, but it kind of ends there. And it's this, one-way process. I think a huge benefit of the UDN and what we can be doing, more broadly and outside of the UDN as well, is a kind of phenotype to genotype to phenotype to genotype to genotype to phenotype, process where it's much more of a back and forth, updating the, phenotypic data that we have and what we know about somebody's, clinical presentation, especially if they are younger and still kind of developing new findings and aspects of their features. And I think going back to the data multiple times, the data from either whole exome sequencing or whole genome sequencing or RNA sequencing, we only know what we know at that time point in history. So having kind of a one-time analysis of data is missing a lot of things. And so being able to kind of update that process and go back, or now we know that the patient has developed this new feature. So kind of going back to the data, are there genes that might have been missed the first time around? So having that be a much more flexible kind of ongoing process, I think that requires more ongoing kind of connection and communication with patients to make sure that they are updated of that process, kind of, in line with what's going on and on board. But I think that's very much, outside of the traditional scope, and I think what will help us make more diagnoses over time.
And communication with patients is so critical, and it's the one thing that we hear from the participants is they want more communication. So I think you won't have problems with the participants. It's more going back. So Bill, in your crystal ball, 5 to 10 years, what do you see?
I see 23,000 human genes and 8,000 rare diseases associated with those genes,
All right.
meaning that there are a hell of a lot more human diseases that haven't been discovered yet
Mhm.
that are associated with those genes. And not only that, but a single gene can give rise to several different diseases, human disease. So I think 5-10 years from now, we're still going to need discovery, and we're still going to need diagnosis of the rare disorders that take a lot of investment. And make maybe a couple other points. One is that in order for a person to be accepted into our undiagnosed diseases program, that person generally needs to have a pretty extensive evaluation by what medicine is capable of doing today. And then once we see the patient like that, and we are able to diagnose maybe a third of them or 40% or so, we have the 60%. That 60% has not only passed the barrier of having everything that major medical centers of the country could do, but also that the Undiagnosed Diseases Program or a clinical site of a network is able to do. And now the yield for finding a diagnosis after all of that is no longer 40%, it's now 5% or so, no matter how much you pursue it. So my point being that after that, you're putting in this much effort to make this much diagnosis. And it's, let's say, agonizing for people like me and us to decide what to pursue next. Because the next patient who's accepted into our undiagnosed disease program has a 40% chance of getting a diagnosis from our workup, and the patient that we've already seen has only a 5% chance. Where should we invest our limited resources? And so, of course, we do invest our resources in people who don't have a diagnosis yet, despite being accepted into our program. But we do that on a research basis because we are the NIH, et cetera, and that's our job. But in terms of humanity and the right thing, it's really difficult to make those types of decisions, those hard decisions. And then my other point is that awareness is the thing that will bring us all together. That is, the patients being aware of the opportunities to engage in an undiagnosed disease program, the researchers being aware of other individuals who have this, and awareness goes along with sharing and reading of the literature and putting the diagnoses in the literature, et cetera. I think that we will reverse this over the next 5 or 10 years. I do, but it will be because we're sharing so much information with each other and not being possessive about it. And patients are willing to share their stories.
Exactly. Great. So Shinya, you have the last word on this question. What are things going to look like in this space in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of things that was said already. I want to expand on what Bill said about discovery. So he estimated 8,000 genes coming up as, right now it's about 5,000. So he's actually thinking 3,000 more. And actually that rate is actually the current statistics. There's about 300 to 400 new disease genes discovered every year. So if you add 10 years, that's 3,000. I think there's more than that. I think that, there's some estimates that's actually 13,000 or 15,000, whatever is conserved across the organism. You should have some kind of a deleterious effect if you have mutated in one way or the other. I think there's a lot of value, basic knowledge value about human genes. And these rare disease patients are really giving us the hint of understanding, true understanding what human genes do. We actually can estimate and think that, elaborate from the results from model organisms like mice, what we think a human gene does. But having a patient with a specific variant in front of us with all these symptoms actually really tells us biology about the human being. And I think that biology could be leveraged to come up with therapeutics, not only for the rare diseases, but for common diseases. There's a lot of things like, for example, Gaucher disease is a rare disease. Well, parents actually have a risk of Parkinson's disease, and Parkinson affect many, many other people. Same thing story story with Alzheimer's disease. A lot of genes that are involved in mitochondria are coming up as risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So there's so much to learn about common diseases, things that are really affecting a lot of people, including like diabetes or, not only neurological diseases, but also, cancer. Like cancer is also flip side of rare diseases, for example. These are variants that have not occurred in the germline, but in somatic cell that actually keep on evolving. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from other fields. There's a lot of basic scientists that's actually purely doing their own research, but they have the capacity to, really help patients and come up with novel ideas and getting them engaged and knowing about like how they can contribute. I think every one of us can contribute in one way or the other. It's just that bringing everybody to the table. And I think thank you for really the Wilhelm Foundation and UDNF and UDNI to actually have the opportunity, if we're a fly geneticist, can be actually part of a panel like this. And I want to see more and more of this happening so that we can really break down barriers over the next 5 years.
Well, thank you so much. So I have only one criticism of this meeting, which is it's too short. We have, many more things we'd like to hear about, but I would like to thank all of the speakers from before the break and now the panel for really a very, very interesting morning. And when you think back about what we've covered, what we've been able to cover in this relatively short period of time, I think we have been successful, but next time, let's make it a full day. Okay, thank you. Thank everybody. So Amy and Helene, you had some closing words, I believe.
Thank you, Alexa, for keeping us on time all day. You've been a good meeting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I too wish it could have been a little bit longer of a day, so we'll take that into account for next year. I want to thank Helene, Mick, the Wilhelm Foundation, UDNI for inviting the UDNF to be a part of co-hosting this event this year. I would encourage all of you to visit the Wilhelm Foundation's website, UDNI's website, and UDNF's website to find ways in which you can get engaged after today's event and learn more about the great work each of our organizations is doing and how you can, help join us in the work that we're doing for the undiagnosed community. Thank you.
Thank you all. It has been amazing to be here with you today, and I hope all of you home have had a nice meeting, nice morning or evening, wherever you are. And if you would like to listen more what people are doing around the world, you can go to the undiagnosedday.org, undiagnosed /dash.org. Undiagnosed-day.org. It's difficult when you are Swedish. and you can listen for more to a virtual event from around the globe, what people are doing, maybe in your country you are in, if you are looking from India or so. So please, thank you for today. It has been amazing. And thank you all the speakers, and thank you audience, and thank you Amy and UDNF, and thank you Harvard for letting us be here today. It has been a fantastic morning. Thank you.